in the CIA, we didn't give a hoot about democracy. I mean, it was fine if a government was elected and would cooperate with us, but if it didn't, then democracy didn't mean a thing to us. And I don't think it means a thing today. The true goal of the United States government is control. And they feel that if the United States did not control the governments of Latin America, then somebody else would. And the principle of government by the people, for the people, of the people, that is that's just silly.
Duane Claridge was head of the CIA's Latin American division in the early 1980s.
Chile, the only reason it exists is because of Pinochet.
At a huge human price.
What human price? Give me a break.
The thousands who were disappeared and murdered?
Thousands? You count them. What thousands?
Well,
and
I've
don't
seen...
talk to me about truth commissions.
I've seen their names in the cemetery in Santiago.
Yeah,
you're saying they're
thousands.
fakes?
They aren't thousands.
Well...
There aren't thousands, sir.
It was a period in which almost everybody in the present situation regards as a dark time, in which the CIA played a major role.
That's right. They played a major role in overthrowing, what's his name?
What's his name was Salvador Allende.
Yeah, fine, okay.
He was democratically elected.
Right, okay.
Is that okay to overthrow a democratically elected government? Is it okay?
It depends on what your national security interests are.
Are you denying that Pinochet caused huge suffering in that country?
I don't buy. That he committed crimes, I agree.
Mm-hmm. But it's worth it.
Huh?
Is that what you're saying? Those crimes are worth it?
Yeah. Sometimes, unfortunately, things have to be changed in a rather ugly way. You're taking the stuff from these propaganda mills. And I'm not interested.
What are the propaganda mills?
All these things, this truth thing and all that, they're nothing but propaganda mills.
Do you really think they're...
I know so.
Are they all conning us, lying us?
Yeah,
Amnesty International?
Amnesty International is right in the middle of it.
During the 1980s, the years of Ronald Reagan in the White House, a trail of carnage and grief was blazed across Central America. I reported America's war against Nicaragua, which had the temerity to overthrow a Washington-backed dictator, Somoza. The CIA attacked Nicaragua with death squads known as the Contra. Why did Washington attack such tiny countries? Because the weaker they are, the greater the threat. People who can free themselves against all the odds are sure to inspire others. What right have you, when I mean you, the CIA, the United States government, or any foreign power, what right do you have to do what you do in other countries? What
National
right?
security interests.
But that's a divine right, isn't it? Because the people that you do it to have no say in this.
Yeah, well, that's just tough. We are going to protect ourselves, and we're going to go on protecting ourselves because we end up protecting all of you. And let's not forget that.
Right, no, I won't.
We'll intervene whenever we decide it's in our national security interest to intervene. And if you don't like it, lump it. Get used to it, world. We're not going to put up with nonsense. And if our interests are threatened, we're going to do it.
By December 1975, the countdown to the invasion of East Timor was in its final stages. President Gerald Ford and his Secretary of State Henry Kissinger arrived in Indonesia on December the 5th, on a visit described by a State Department official as the Big Wink.
As an example of their certain knowledge of what was about to happen, the embassy staff were taking unusual measures to plan as many photo and visual opportunities to present Ford and Suharto together. demonstrating unlimited support for Suharto and the Indonesian government. And I thought, wait a minute, something is seriously wrong here. I joined CIA many years ago in the early 60s because I was one of these fellows who thought instead of complaining about what was going on in the world and doing nothing about it, you might be able to accomplish something good. And when I was in this situation in Indonesia, what I saw instead was that my own government was very much involved in what was going on in East Timor, and that what was going on was not good. You can be 100% certain that Suharto was explicitly given the green light to do what he did.
The Americans persuaded the Indonesians to delay the invasion until after the president had left. And on December the 7th, as the presidential jet climbed out of Indonesian airspace, the bloodbath began.
A lot of people are being killed, I repeat, indiscriminately.
The first days, hundreds and hundreds of people were simply massacred upon the Indonesian troop arrival in Dili.
Ela foi morta com bombardeamento que os indonésios atacaram aquela zona de Jumalai, Suai, intenso bombardeamento, então foi um estilhaço que matou a minha filha com 21 anos. E muito mais gente, feridos, mortos com bombardeamento dos indonésios.
These are the hulks of Indonesian landing craft, left as stark reminders to the population on the beach in the center of Dili. When the Indonesians landed here, they began an operation that has been compared in its savagery with Pol Pot's takeover of Cambodia. Hundreds of people were gunned down in the streets, in schools, in shops, in their homes, in the hospital. Live grenades were thrown into houses. Women and girls were raped in front of their families. The Indonesian troops had been told that the East Timorese were communists and primitives who threatened the very existence of Indonesia itself. The strategy was clearly to terrorize an entire nation.
We were learning about it from hard, firm reports from people on the scene in East Timor. Reports of people being herded into school buildings by Indonesian soldiers with the buildings set on fire, and anyone trying to get out being shot, but most of the people being burned alive. People being herded into fields and machine gunned. People being hunted down in the mountains, so anyone out there was in what amounted to a free fire zone.
The precedent for economic hitmen really began back in the early 50s when democratically elected Mossadegh, who was elected in Iran, he was considered to be the hope for democracy in the Middle East and around the world. He was Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But one of the things that he'd run on and began to implement was the idea that foreign oil companies needed to pay the Iranian people a lot more for the oil that they were taking out of Iran. The Iranian people should benefit from their own oil. Strange policy. We didn't like that, of course. But we were afraid to do what we normally were doing, which was to send in the military. Instead, we sent in one CIA agent, Kermit Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's relative. And Kermit went in with a few $1 million and was very, very effective and efficient. And in a short amount of time, he managed to get Mossadegh overthrown and brought in the Shah of Iran to replace him. who always was favorable to oil. And it was extremely effective.
Mobs overflow Tehran. Army officers shout that Mossadegh has surrendered and his regime as virtual dictator of Iran is ended. Pictures of the Shah are paraded through the streets as sentiment reverses. The Shah is welcomed home.
So back here in the United States, in Washington, people looked around and said, wow, that was easy and cheap. So this established a whole new way of manipulating countries, of creating empire. It is interesting to me how this system has continued pretty much the same way for years and years and years, except the economic hitmen have got better and better and better. Then we come up with, very recently, what happened in Venezuela. In 1998, Hugo Chavez gets elected president, following a long line of presidents who had been very corrupt and basically destroyed the economy of the country. And Chavez was elected amidst all that. Chavez stood up to the United States, and he's done it primarily demanding that Venezuelan oil be used to help the Venezuelan people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. So in 2002, a coup was staged, which there's no question in my mind, and most other people's minds, that the CIA was behind that coup. Except in the case of Chavez, he was smart enough, and the people were so strongly behind him that they overcame it, which was a phenomenal moment in the history of Latin America. Iraq actually is a perfect example of the way the whole system works. So we economic hitmen are the first line of defense. We go in and we try to corrupt governments and get them to accept these huge loans, which we then use as leverage to basically own them. If we fail, then the second line of defense is we send in the jackals. And the jackals either overthrow governments or they assassinate. And once that happens, when a new government comes in, and boy, it's going to toe the line, because the new president knows what will happen if he doesn't. In the case of Iraq, both of those things failed. Economic hitmen were not able to get through to Saddam Hussein. We tried very hard. We tried to get him to accept a deal very similar to what the House of Saud had accepted in Saudi Arabia, but he wouldn't accept it. And so the jackals went in to take him out. They couldn't do it. His security was very good. So in '91, we send in the troops and we take out the Iraqi military. So we assume at that point that Saddam Hussein is going to come around. We could have taken him out, of course, at that time, but we didn't want to. He's the kind of strong man we like. He controls his people. We thought he could control the Kurds and keep the Iranians in their border and keep pumping oil for us. And then once we took out his military, now he's going to come around. So the economic hitmen go back in the 90s without success. If they'd had success, he'd still be running the country. We'd be selling him all the fighter jets he wants and everything else he wants. But they couldn't, they didn't have success. The jackals couldn't take him out again, so we sent the military in once again, and this time we did the complete job. And in that way, we've really created an empire, but we've done it very, very subtly. It's clandestine. All the empires of the past were built on the military, and everybody knew they were building them. So the British knew they were building them, the French, the Germans, the Romans, the Greeks. And they were proud of it, and they always had some excuse, like spreading civilization, spreading some religion, something like that. But they knew they were doing it. We don't. The majority of the people in the United States have no idea that we're living off the benefits of a clandestine empire, that today there's more slavery in the world than ever before.